Welcome back, guys, to the next segment of our lesson today. You're joining me and we're doing life sciences. We've looked at the various different cycles. We've looked at different processes in the water cycle. Let's try and unpack those processes in detail and refer to how these contribute to maintaining the water cycle. It's important that we recognize that water is a precious commodity that's constantly needed by all forms of life on Earth. So let's try and unpack what are the different processes that ensures that water remains constant on Earth. So the first process we're going to look at is evaporation. It's important that we recognize that evaporation makes up a significant component of how water is lost from the surface of Earth. So guys, if we go back to looking at the concept of evaporation, most of the Earth's surface is covered with water. Evaporation is essentially the rising of the water, and that water is as a result of the surface water that we see on Earth. So a large amount of water is lost during evaporation. Many of our dams lose a significant amount of water every year through evaporation. So a significant component that returns water back into the cycle is evaporation. So essentially the transformation of water from liquid to gas, it moves from the groundwater into the atmosphere, and we'll see that this process relies on energy from the sun, where the water now changes from a liquid state to a gas state and rises to form what we refer to as clouds and water vapor in the atmosphere. The next process is condensation. Condensation essentially is the transformation of water vapor to liquid, where water droplets in the air creating clouds and fog. So guys, when we look at clouds that are formed, these are often a result of the large amounts of evaporation that takes place. So we know that evaporation is the accumulation of water vapor in the atmosphere. Those water droplets collect together and form larger clouds. And these larger clouds essentially are clouds that have built up as a result of the large amounts of water vapor that is evaporated. This process is called condensation. Again, the water vapor condensing to form clouds in the atmosphere. The next process in the water cycle is called precipitation. And if we look at the process of precipitation here, it could refer to how water vapor and clouds change back to a liquid state. So this is the condensed water vapor that falls to the Earth's surface is now called precipitation. Most of the precipitation occurs as rain, but also includes snow, hail, and sleet. So guys, during the process of evaporation, we see condensation occurring, and that condensation means that now we have water that builds up in the atmosphere. Precipitation essentially is important in returning the atmospheric water back to the Earth. And we see that happening through rain, snow, sleet, and hail. And we are fortunate in that we experience most of that in the context of a South African environment. We see lots of rain during our summer. We experience snow in certain parts of the country during winter. And we also see hail and fog at different times of the year. So these are significant contributing factors to returning water back from the atmosphere into the groundwater. The next process is called percolation and runoff. Some of the water runs off above the ground after it rains and forms streams and rivers that flow into lakes and oceans. So we do know that when we have lots of rain, some of the water runs off, and that is called surface runoff. And that fills up into our lakes, it fills off and runs off into our streams as well as the sea. And so this is an important component of how the water vapor returns back to the Earth's surface, including the water bodies such as lakes, rivers, dams, and oceans. So this is called surface runoff. However, there is some water that also flows directly into the soil. So we refer to that water moving horizontally through the soil as percolation. So it percolates into this. And this is a result of the pull of gravity on that. So in this image here, we can see that as water runs off, some of it infiltrates through the soil and percolates into the surface of the earth. And this is an important part of our landscape in that not all of the water runs off. And so much of the water is absorbed into the ground, and that collects into this ground table water, which then we refer to as percolation. It's important that we have that water collecting. This is the water that we tap into when we drill boreholes. So we're referring to that water that collects as a result of percolation into what we refer to as the groundwater beneath the Earth's surface. An important process that also contributes to the water cycle is transpiration. Again, transpiration is the release of water vapor from plants and soil into the air. Water vapor is a gas that cannot be seen. Guys, we've looked at the effect of various factors on the rate of transpiration. Transpiration essentially is an important process of the plants absorbing water from the root. So in order for plants to be able to absorb water from the ground, they need to lose that water. And that loss of water through the surfaces of the leaves is called transpiration. And we see that transpiration is an important process in converting some of the groundwater and releasing that back into the atmosphere. So transpiration is important. Again, this can influence the environment negatively and positively if we remove the plants. We see that transpiration is an important biological process that maintains the water cycle. So the importance of the water cycle is crucial to sustaining all forms of life on Earth. As I mentioned earlier on, water is an important component of many physiological processes, the process of photosynthesis, as well as the process of digestion and chemical reactions in the bodies of different organisms. So, the hydrological cycle is important because it provides water for plants, which is an important process of photosynthesis, as well as for animals in terms of for processes like digestion and the absorption of nutrients. It also regulates the weather patterns on our planet. Water forms an important process in also thermoregulating our body surfaces. We know that animals that live on land require to cool their body surfaces down. So you'll often find your terrestrial animals needing water to cool down and to cleanse themselves. If water did not naturally recycle itself, the earth would run out of clean water, which is essential to life. It's important that we understand that water constantly recycles itself. So the amount of water that we have on earth is fixed, and this water constantly recycles itself. What is important for us to recognize is that the quality of the water is not the same. What do I mean by that? So due to human influence and impact, we find that human activity has affected the quality of water. So let's talk about the human impact on the water cycle. So humans carry out various different activities, and these include industrial processes, agriculture, as well as farming processes. These all influence the quality of water as well as the water cycle. So when we talk about damming rivers for hydroelectric facilities, so dams are often built along rivers, and this is to slow and to close down and to build up a large reservoir of water. That water is then used in hydroelectric power stations. We know that these dams often affect the availability of water further down the rivers. Again, the quality of water that is used in a hydroelectric power station means that that water is constantly circulated. If we examine the life forms living in these water bodies in dams, often are affected by the temperatures of the water, by the fact that this water is recycled. So again, a human activity where the quality of water in an environment is affected. Using water for farming. A large amount of water from our rivers and streams are often used for irrigation purposes, and that's an important part of understanding the human impact on the water cycle. The next component is looking at deforestation. Again, we spoke about deforestation as a process of removing trees. If we remove the trees, we know that photosynthesis decreases. It's important to recognize that plants play an important role in pulling up the groundwater through transpiration and losing that into the atmosphere. This makes that water available for processes that help to keep the environment moist and humid. The burning of fossil fuels again produces large amounts of impact on our water bodies. So if we look at farming practices that carry out irrigation, due to the human demands, we know that food is an essential part of our survival. In order for us to be able to survive, we need to be able to grow crop. To grow crop effectively, we need to have good, effective irrigation systems. Have you wondered, where does the water come from? It often comes from our rivers, streams and lakes. This means that the level of water in our rivers, streams and lakes often decreases, in turn affecting the aquatic organisms that live in these water bodies. But it's important that we recognize that irrigation is an artificial watering system that allows, that is used in areas where there's not enough rainfall, or it's used to speed up the growth of crop. Unfortunately, guys, it removes water from rivers and causes surface runoff, and in turn removes the minerals from the soil. In addition, much of the water evaporates. So guys, it's important that we understand that irrigation helps to grow plants, but with the excess of irrigation comes surface runoff. And this means that the surface runoff draws out the healthy nutrients from the soil, which then drains back into water bodies, causing other processes like eutrophication, which we will discuss in a later one. What's important is that when you look at this image, spray irrigation means that there's large sprays of water that is applied over vast areas of land. This means that a lot of that water actually is lost through evaporation. So if we were to quantify the amount of water actually entering the soil from spray irrigation, there's a significant amount that is lost into the atmosphere. This again depleting our natural reservoirs of water in our lakes, rivers, dams, and other ponds. Deforestation, guys, again means the removal of trees that has a major impact on the water cycle. Normally, trees release water vapor when they transpire, as we mentioned, transpiration. This water vapor evaporates into the atmosphere before precipitating back to the earth as either rain, sleet, or snow. So if we remove the trees, it means that the atmosphere does not have evaporation, we don't have evaporation contributing to the precipitation of rain, snow, and sleet. So trees play an important part of our rainfall as well. Here's an image showing you again vast areas of land that have been removed from trees. Again, it means that when we have rains, lots of the water is going to run off the surface and going to remove the important nutrients from the surface of these soils. So deforestation therefore affects the weather patterns because trees are cut down and there will be less rain in an area. The land becomes drier and less stable. Rains and less stable rains, instead of water being soaked up, we find that now increases runoff and erosion. So when water runs off these surfaces, we find that lots of the topsoil is removed. Again, the impact that this has is on the global ecosystem. We also know that we have wetlands that are an important part of our biomes, and these are natural sponges in the environment that soak up the excess runoff. So it's important that we recognize that wetlands are an important biome or part of the ecosystem that helps to collect and sponge off that water that runs off the surface. We see that wetlands are important as they provide food and habitat to fish and wildlife in a variety of different habitats. It also is important in improving the quality of water by filtering out pollutants. They play an important role during floods, where they retain large volumes of water during rainy seasons and release them during drought. The greenhouse effect is also a natural phenomenon. And so if we look at the water cycle, due to increasing global temperatures, we find that lots of our polar ice caps are melting, and that is contributing to an increase in the water levels. And this in turn affects factors such as the shoreline and other areas that are low-lying. So guys, we've looked at the water cycle, we've looked at processes that are involved in maintaining the water cycle. It's important that we recognize that humans have a significant impact on the environment, and there are things that we can do to reduce our impact and maintain the water cycle. I trust that you've enjoyed the lesson and that you've engaged on the topic. I wish you well. Have a good day. See you soon. Bye, lekker day.